Hello, everyone. I hope you can all see me and hear me correctly. If something is wrong, you can tell me through the chat. Thank you so much for joining our second ever live speech, this time for the Frankfurt Book Fair. I hope this is the last time that we have to do like the fairs through Zooms and through webinars and through all these things, and that we can see each other in person. In a way, at the Pontas agency, we're doing both this Frankfurt. As we're doing like Zoom meetings, we're doing this live pitch, but we're also, Anna Solepont and myself, we're traveling to Frankfurt on the 19th, which is quite exciting after 2 years. And it seems that more and more will be at the fair, even though it's going to be very different from what we've been used to. So I just wanted to thank you again for listening to me. I'll try to be quite speedy and straight to the point, so I don't steal you too much of your time. Also, my colleague Clara will be sharing the titles and the name of the authors and the link to the synopsis through the chat while I speak. So you'll be able to have everything, and we'll send an email tomorrow with like a recap as well of the titles that I'll be covering. So this September, I'm not sure about how you're feeling about it, but for me, it felt like a bit like a normal pre-fair bus. Maybe because I've been arranging not only Zoom meetings, but also like physical meetings at the fair. And that's given me a thrill of what fairs used to do. I keep doing the same rituals I always do before a fair. I buy new clothes, I put some like makeup, new and comfy shoes for the fairgrounds. So if you're going to be around, send us an email. That will be very delighted to meet you there. And if you want to do one-to-one and you are not traveling, I'm also very happy to still do Zoom or Teams or Google Meet meetings, I guess, throughout October and November. This is like ongoing. And we're hoping that next year it will be much more in person than last year and this year. So let's start talking about books. The Pontas hot list this season is a list that I'm super excited to tell you about. I'm going to cover 10 books, 9 fiction and 1 non-fiction. They're books from different places around the world, very different authors. So we're hoping that maybe one fits your list. And as you know, we're always delighted to be working with you, and you can request any materials afterwards. Just send me an email and I'll be very happy to shoot everything over. So let's start. The first novel I wanted to talk to you about is a Kenyan author, and she's a debut author. Her name is Irene Muchemi Ndiritu. This is Irene. She's an author from Kenya. Even though she's lived many years in the US and now she's based in Cape Town with her husband and her kids. I think we signed Irene almost 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago. And I still remember the first time I got that message and her pitch in an email. And I think I always love a good love story. And this was definitely it. The novel is called Lucky Girl. World English rights are sold already to the Dial Press, to Whitney Frick and Rose Fox. I think their plans so far are to publish it like at the end of next year or early 2023 latest. So we'll keep you posted on any plans as we know more from their end. The novel can be pitched like Americana meets modern love, like the New York Times column and even like the TV series. I would say it's high quality women's fiction or like upmarket book club fiction, I do think this is a book that's absolutely perfect for book clubs. In a way, it reminded me a little bit of Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. The writing is strong, but what's the core of the novel, or what's the key of the novel, is this main character called Soila. Soila is a young girl. She's been raised by her mother, who is this very strict and controlling African mother. She's a matriarch. She runs not only her household, but also her business, which is quite successful. She's been a widow for many years. Soila doesn't really know what happened to her father. She thinks it was a car accident, but we'll find out. There's more on the story as the novel moves along. And the only thing Soila can think of is escaping like her mother's control. So when she's 18, she convinces her that the best for her is to go to New York to university. And her mother's condition is just like she has to study business so she can come back to Nairobi and take care of the family business. And she does that. And throughout the novel, we'll find Soila always at the crossroads of what does she has to do, what she wants. Can she follow her passion to become a photographer, or will that deceive her mother? So she's always asking herself if she can really pursue her own dreams, or if she has to continue doing what her mother has planned for her and for her life. So of course she has a boyfriend that would tick all the boxes. He's Kenyan American, very good family. Things don't really work out. She also has a brilliant, really fun flatmate, Black American flatmate. There's also like a lot of talk and discussions in the book and meditation about race. I would say from a different perspective, because it's from a very African perspective. Soila arrived in New York and she's the first time she's been called Black. She comes from a place where everyone is Black. So she doesn't really grasp all the details and all the intricacies that race has in a place like the US. That will be a learning curve for her. As she moves along, she excels at university, but she is not really happy studying business and financing. She ends up working for a bank. She never understands if she is hired because of like diversity quota, but she's very good at her job. And of course, she falls in love with the man that her mother would despise the most. She keeps that a secret from her mother. And at the end of the book, her mother, who has been like shielded from Soila's life, comes to New York, and she realizes that her mother had also had a very like difficult life, and she struggled a lot. So it's, for one, is a brilliant modern love story with a great ending, but it's also like a great novel about a mother and daughter relationship. There's also many topics. That's why I say it's perfect for book clubs. There's the race issue. There's also an abortion that she goes through. There's 9/11 happening at the same time. There's the Alzheimer that the mother will suffer at the end of the book, and how Soila has to take care of the mother. And we will love and hate Soila throughout the book. So it's a book with many layers. The writing is brilliant. And I think it's one of the rare books that, like, for me, ticked absolutely all the boxes. The writing is great. I think it has great sales potential all around the world. So we're super, super excited to finally be able to share this manuscript with you. That's been edited by the editors at Dial Press for quite a while. So I do hope you'll want to read. I do think it fits lists that do quite accessible literary fiction, but also like upmarket and even like a very, very high quality commercial women's fiction. So it's a fantastic book. As you can see, I absolutely love it. And I hope you will too. Moving on, as I see the minutes are passing by, is a debut in Catalan that we have so many hopes for. She's a brilliant author. Her name is called Natalie Romani. She's a journalist. She currently lives in France, between Paris and Brussels. She's an international journalist, so she speaks perfect English, absolutely perfect French. And I think she's just started promoting the novel here in Catalonia. The novel just came out last week in Catalan, which is original language, meaning that you can apply for the grants from the Institut Ramon Llull, and in Spanish at the same time. And this is the cover. Not sure if you can all see it. So this is a novel that it's a bit tricky to pitch because it's a big story. I guess the main character is Sarah Greenfield, and Sarah she's been raised by her aunt, who's a very famous or well-known psychoanalyst. The novel mostly happens in the US, but also in Eastern Europe. And Natalia is from Barcelona. Natalia is also the name of one of the characters. And she, on a trip to New York, she sits next to a psychologist, and she's given like a strange work to do, which is to write letters to this patient of the a psychologist. On the other hand, we have Sarah Greenfield, who goes to Pembroke University to do a PhD, and her thesis is on the character of Thomas Mann, Magic Mountains, Settembrini. So this is a book about books. This is a book about literature. This is a book about art. There's many meditations on philosophy. And Sarah Greenfield will embark herself in a fantastic road trip through, I would say, maybe the most important places or landmarks of the war in the Balkans. And she'll be led in an Alfa Romeo by a Claudio Magris. That's one of the other brilliant characters in the book. So the book has kind of two angles. The most personal, like Sarah Greenfield's past, how her parents died when she was like a young girl, and how she's pursuing love and passion, and she falls in love with her professor, who's married, and is married to the daughter of this woman who's lost her mind, and the journalist Natalie Romani is writing letters to. So it's a story about memory and about personal memory, but also like collective memory, as we will see in the road trip. It's also like a novel about the old Europe and the history of the old Europe as well. But it is also like a love story, a passion, story full of passion. Settembrini in the book is not only the character that Sarah Greenfield is researching, but it's also like a cafe in New York that's kind of home for Sarah, and where everything like will come together at the end, that all the stories of all the characters will be linked and entangled. The reviews, I think there was a massive review, really big review in La Vanguardia this past Saturday, that it's been amazing. The booksellers all over the country are falling in love with the book, and Salani preempted Italian rights very quickly. So we're hoping that more editors from different countries will follow suit quite quickly. We have a sample in English, and the original language is Catalan, but we also have the full Spanish translation for it. So moving on to the next one is Javier Fuentes. This is a debut as well as the other two. No cover yet. This is much newer. And Javier is a Spanish author, but he wrote the novel in English. He's been living in the US since '97. He's in his mid-40s at the moment. And he's worked a lot on his writing. He did an MFA at the New York University. He's a Lambda Fellow. He's done a lot of different workshops. He's quite well connected in the New York literary scene. And his debut novel, Countries of Origin, it's written in English, but we have, and it's currently in submission in the UK and the US. But we've already sold Spanish rights as an editor requested it from the catalog and read it overnight and fell in love with it and sent an offer. So Umbriel is going to publish it in Spanish, which is also very special, as that's the mother tongue of the author. And Countries of origin could be pitched as Street Bitter meets Call Me By Your Name. It's a queer love story. It's also a story about looking for a home and looking for belonging. It's a story about class. It's a story about sexuality, and um, also like about being comfortable in one's own skin. It's a novel set between New York and Madrid. I would say a third of the novel is maybe set in New York, and the 2/3 are set in Madrid and in the south of Spain, a little bit at the end. And the two main characters are Demetrio. Demetrio is in his early 30s. He's grown up in New York. He was born in Spain, but when he was 8 years old, he became an orphan. And the only family that he had left was an uncle that was living in New York. He was a university professor. So he was sent there, but he's never had any legal papers. This hasn't been a problem until now, but he's becoming this very hype and successful chef, pastry chef. He's been working in the same restaurants for many years, but he feels he wants to challenge himself. And that means moving on to another job. And when that happens and they check him out, of course, they realize that his social security number is fake. He's got basically like two options: or to be deported or to return to Spain for a number of years and then reapply for American citizenship. And he decides on the latter. And on the plane back to Madrid, he meets this very handsome man called Jacobo. Jacobo is from, I would say, high class Madrid. His father is the CEO of a big corporation. He's studying in New York. He lives in a very big house in the center of Madrid. He's got servants. His mother is from an aristocratic family. So they create this bond during the 8 hours or 9 hours they are in the plane. And Demetrio knows very well that he's gay and what he wants, but that's not exactly the same for Jacobo. But he invites him to his house because he doesn't really know anyone in Madrid, and he introduces him to all his circles, his friends, while Demetrio struggles first with the language, because even though he speaks Spanish, he doesn't really grasp the slang or like the customs. He also doesn't feel really much at home. He's not used of like being in a big house with servants and a cook and everything. So while they both struggle in different things, they start falling in love. And this will be the center of the book. And it's going to be like a toxic in many ways and a struggling relationship, and something that they will both have to decide if it's worth fighting for. At the same time, Jacobo will have to return to New York and to his studies, and Demetrio will have to find a house and a job in Madrid and settle there. So when they try to do that, they take a road trip to the south of Spain to a place called Cabo de Gata, and that's where both of them will have to face like their choices and if they're able to continue being together or not. And Demetrio will have to think what's home, or where does he find home exactly. So it's I would say it's accessible literary fiction. There's also like a lot of going on in the book. The writing is very special as well, and we're hoping to have like news soon about English rights, and that more of you will also like read and fall in love with the story. Moving on, we have an Indian author, Rahula Das. Her debut novel was published in July by Picador in India, and it's called A Death in Shonagachi. We've sold US rights to Amazon Crossing, and they are going to release it next June. And they're changing the title to Small Deaths. So apologies. If you see like both titles, it's the same book. The US edition has been edited slightly, not much, but it's a bit tighter. And it was longlisted to one of the most prestigious prizes in India called the GCB Prize. All the reviews that are coming from India are insane. They are really like raving reviews, highly acclaiming the novel. We've sold Russian rights to Ripple, and we are closing an option for film rights that we're hoping to be able to disclose with you very soon. One of the things I loved most about this book is how a mystery or a noir can be literary, dark, yet fun at the same time. I had a lot of fun reading this book for the first time. I thought the humor was really on point. It was really sharp. And it's a novel set in Shonagachi. Shonagachi is the biggest red light district in Asia, and it's in Kolkata in India. And it's like a city within a city. There are many girls that are being stolen from the villages when they are like just young girls, like 10 years old, and they're being sent there. They are prostitutes, and of course then they are pregnant, and they kind of create their own families there. So most of the novel is set in a building in Shonagachi run by this madame. And the young girls, they're all quite protective of each other. There's a lot of empathy in this book, even though all the characters are really outcast. We have different characters, but the main one is Lali. She's one of the prostitutes. Her neighbor is murdered right at the beginning of the book. And she tries to find out what happened to her. She knows there's more of what they've been told by the madame. But they also have this idea that if they move them to a higher floor, it means they're going to be better paid. So she's moved into the room of the murdered girl, and she quickly realizes what the future will hold for her, and it will be quite fast-paced, and we'll move on into an ashram and like a sex ring. There's an NGO trying to save these girls. There's a policeman that's unable to do absolutely anything for them. And then there's Lali's, I would say, most loyal client, who is this very poor Indian writer of erotica novels who just wants to save her and will do absolutely everything to save her. So it's a noir. It's also a story that talks about the rights of these people who are also like humans and should be treated as such. And she really sheds light on many of the difficult issues of a place like Shonagachi in a very entertaining way, with quite an elevated language. I would say this is the literary noir. But also like fun, like you laugh with the characters, especially with Tilu. She's someone you will never forget once you've read the book. So moving on, I'll talk now of an author and a book I think I've been talking about for years. We've been representing JJ Bola, I think, since 5 or 6 years ago. And his second novel, The Selfless Act of Breathing, is coming out on November 4th. We're incredibly excited. This is the UK cover that's coming out now in November. And this is the US cover that's coming out in February next year. The UK is published by Dialogue Books, the editor being Charmaine Lovegrove. And this is the US to be published by Atria. The editor is Michelle Herrera Mulligan and Lindsay Sagnet. We've sold rights in German, French, Italian, Brazil. We've sold film rights that we were hoping to do like a press release soon, but we're still waiting news. It's the film rights were sold to a big Hollywood producer. There's already a studio financing the project. So we're very excited that this is actually going to happen and become a movie. Also, everything in the UK has really started ahead of the publication. There's a lot of buzz. It was already in a list of the Independent newspaper 2 days ago as one of the 10 novels by a Black author to read this month. Elizabeth Day, the author of Magpie, recommended it yesterday on BBC4. We have many blurbs from heavy hitters, and this is, as the editors have put it, like Transcendent Kingdom meets A Man Called Ove. So the pitch, I think, is quite striking and quite easy to do. And this is a very emotionally charged novel. We have Michael, who is a teacher at secondary school in London. He should be very happy with his life. And everything seems to be going well for him. He still lives with his mother, who is a refugee from Congo. And he's flirting with Sarah, another teacher at school, but inside he's not really happy. And he decides to buy a ticket to the US, to LA, and take all his savings out. And when the savings run out, he's going to kill himself. So this is also a book about mental health, about finding also what drives you through in life. It's also a novel that talks about police brutality, about being Black in the world, about being a refugee. It's a book that has a really feel-good ending about it. And I think it really sums up who JJ is and everything, all the work he's been doing, first as a poet, also how he's also been, in a way, the voice of refugees. He moved to London when he was 9, from Congo with all his family, and how a gifted writer he is as well. So he's definitely one of the authors that we've been pushing his career from the very beginning, and we're so proud and so happy to see how high he's flying and how much higher he can go. The next author is also an author that you will all know. It's Clarissa Guenawan. This is her third novel called Water Song. You may remember her from her debut a few years ago that was called Rainbirds. I think that novel was published in 12 languages worldwide. And just like, I think a week ago, we sold film rights for that book to a Japanese producing company. Water Song is being published by Scribe in June next year. There's actually, I would say, just an option publisher now in Russia. We've sold Bahasa Indonesia rights to Gramedia. Clarissa is Indonesian, but she lives in Singapore, and she's been living there for many, many years. She writes in English, which is not her first language, and I think that makes her writing very special. All her novels, this being the third, are set in Japan, and they all have this very mysterious aura. They are all following some kind of mystery. There's always like some kind of murder in the book, but it's much more about how the past of one person shapes your present and your future. So here we're following Shoji, who is a young man. He moves in with his girlfriend when they finish university, and he's struggling to find a job. So she offers him to join where she's working, and that it's quite a strange place. Basically, they are paid just to listen to clients, but not judge. They are not psychologists, but they're just there listening, and they cannot bring anything that goes inside that place to the outside world. So Shoji's first client is actually the wife of the CEO. And when he starts knowing too much, Shoji's girlfriend, Yoko, disappears. So Shoji will follow her, will try to find her, will move to Tokyo to find her, but will realize, he will soon realize that he didn't know much about who his girlfriend was. And I think there's a point in the novel where he gives up. He finds a job in a magazine, but he cannot forget his girlfriend, and he cannot forget his client as well. And he will remember that when he was a young boy, he was told by a fortune teller that he should be very careful with women with the water element in their names, and that's the case of these two. A third woman will appear, that will be the third one in what he's been told. And this is, in a way, it's a love story, but there's a lot of like different mysteries going throughout. I think Clarissa is very special at building like this world that feels very different. It's also like a part of the novel is set in Tokyo, but most of it is set always like in smaller places in Japan. She's got a great sense of place, and a very both luminous and seamless prose that will like really take you through the book. So we're hoping that with Water Song we'll be able to like keep Clarissa being published in many different languages. I think she's also like a very steady author. She's got a great readership both in the UK, in Australia, and in the US in English. And we're hoping to build her career also in translation. The next author is quite different. He's called Kirmen Uribe. He writes in Basque, Euskera, which is one of the minority languages that's spoken in Spain, in the north of Spain. Kirmen won in 2009. He was the first author to win the National Critics Award here in Spain with a novel that wasn't originally written in Spanish. So this was a really big thing. The novel was called Bilbao, New York, Bilbao. It was quickly translated into Spanish, and it was published by Seix Barral, and it sold over 100,000 copies at the time. It was published, I think, in 10 languages, mostly, I would say, like smaller markets. It was Gallimard in France, but he's never been published in Germany. He's never been published in Scandinavia. He's never been published in Italy. He's never been published in Dutch. I do think he's an author very exciting, doing different things in literary fiction. He's always exploring the boundaries and bending the genre between fiction and nonfiction. What he did incredibly well in Bilbao, New York, Bilbao, he's doing again in this new novel that's going to be called The Previous Life of Dolphins. It's going to be published in March in Basque, Spanish, and Catalan at the same time. All rights are available, and there are really no option publishers for this author. He was a Cullman Fellow in 2019, meaning that he moved to New York to write this book that we finally have in our hands. And this book tells the story of one of the first suffragists in the US, Rosika Swimmer. She was a Hungarian pacifist. So Kirmen has been digging, the documentary about this woman that he could find in the New York Public Library for over a year. And he's been writing this book in a way that he tells her story, but he also tells his own story of like growing up in a place like the Basque Country, full of terrorism when he was a child and a young boy, how he was in prison for not wanting to do the army service here in Spain when it was compulsory, how that parallelism with the pacifism in some way of Rosika Swimmer you can see in the book. It's also like a novel about migrants and moving from one place to another place, as Kirmen moved with his family to New York. And the novel has 3 parts. The first part, in which it's more him as a writer exploring the story of Rosika Swimmer. The second part is the story of the woman that lives with this writer. And the third and closing part is the point of view of the children of this family that moves to a place like New York. I think what Kirmen does best is transporting you to these different worlds and intertwining different stories and telling you about a real person by using himself as a narrative device, and how he really bends the genre between fiction and nonfiction. I think he's one of the most exciting literary writers in Spain by far. At least he's one that's doing the things like no one else is doing, and he's not afraid to take risks in his writing. So the original language is Basque, which we have the full manuscript for. As I don't expect any of you or many of you to read Basque, we'll soon have an English sample. We now have 200 pages of the novel in Spanish, and in a week or two max, we'll have the full novel in Spanish. I do think if you're looking for a very exciting literary writer, he's definitely someone that should be on your reading list. The next author I wanted to mention, I think I talked already in the previous page. Her name is Janice Pariat. She's also an Indian author. She's also been represented by the agency for a long time. And her third novel, Everything the Light Touches, is coming out in October next year. It's going to be a very big simultaneous launch by HarperCollins India, the Borough Press in the UK, which is an imprint of Harper, and Harper Via in the US. The three editors have been working together with the edits and the author. I think this is a big, ambitious novel about the natural world. I think it can remind you of Euphoria by Lily King, The Inheritance of Loss, The People in the Trees. It's also a novel that has a very interesting structure, literary-wise. So as Jenny explained it to me the first time when she started to write this book, she wanted to write the book that had the structure of a flower. So you'll see that there are three main characters: Shai, who is a young woman in contemporary times in India. Then we have Evie, who is a British woman, the first woman to ever study botany in Cambridge in the late 19th century. Then we have Goethe, when he's writing what it feels to be like not a very well known of his works, but it's the metamorphosis of plants. And then we have the stem of the novel, which is a very short part in poetry form about Linnaeus and how Linnaeus organized the world. And then the novel will close with the other, like closing the stories of each character, Goethe, Evie, and Shai, and how we'll see how everything is connected. In a way, it can be seen like a family saga because they are all connected. Shai and Evie could definitely like be family members. They are all linked by this work, The Metamorphosis of Plants, and the same as Linnaeus, how Linnaeus saw and organized the world. It's a novel that will tell you a lot about the natural world and the plants, and also like this part of India that's the northeast, called Shillong, and it's one of the wettest parts on earth. So we're hoping like really big things will happen for this novel next year when it's published. And we have now the edited manuscript. It will go through copy editing and proofreading, but I think the final text is already there. The other one, and I'll be almost done, is a Mexican writer, Veronica Ayaca. She's written this very dark and spooky thriller called La Herencia. We've sold world, it's published by Planeta Mexico, but we've sold world English rights to Christopher McLehose for his new imprint, Mountain Leopard Press. And in English, it's going to be called The Sorrow Beneath the Tears. This is a novel that it's a novel, so it's fiction, but it can also like be a true crime read because it's inspired by what's kind of known in Mexico, like the most famous serial killer, who was a woman. She was a woman that was a midwife, so she was performing abortions. But as life became more difficult and this was more in secret than ever, and she was also like given some babies that the families didn't want to, and that she couldn't find families to sell those babies to, she started killing those babies. So the story is told through the eyes also of like who are the children of this woman and were like the witnesses of what happened in that house. So it's a novel, and all the factual parts are basically what the author read in newspapers. The reviews that are coming are incredibly good. It's really dark, really spooky, but the writing is excellent. And it's a novel that you really enjoy. And I think it also makes you think a lot now that we're talking a lot about abortion all over the world, of what it meant in the 40s in Mexico City, and what women had to do at the time. So it's a highly interesting thriller, which way more than just like this famous serial killer or like a killer of like babies. We have a big sample already in English, and we should have the full English translation quite soon, as this is published in English in May next year. Last, but definitely not least, is the nonfiction book I mentioned at the beginning. It's by the South African author Imran Koubevia. He's a very well-known author in South Africa. He's also like been published in the US and in the UK, but his latest book, I think it was published just a week ago in South Africa. It's called The Poisoners, as you can see on South Africa's Toxic Past. And this was a book that completely blew my mind away when I read it for the first time. I had no idea how poison was such a big thing in the history and the politics of South Africa of the past 50 years. So in many ways, this is a very journalistic nonfiction book. It's also like a book that's been thoroughly researched for, and you can tell how gifted as a writer Imran is while you're reading it. So it's the sinister retelling of one of South Africa's darkest periods through poison, and how poison has been used as a device by politicians, the ANC, like during the apartheid, how every government and everyone who wanted to be in power in the Southern African countries, not only in South Africa, but also Rhodesia, which is now Zimbabwe, and how all the poisoners and the politician involved with the poison were linked both to Russia and to the US. It's a novel that's a meditation on race, on politics, and also how many of these things have been swept under the rug in South Africa for many years, and how all these poisoners have been kind of rehabilitated and have like a new life. We've sold rights to a podcast company that will develop a 4-season series, true crime series based on poison. And I think that's going to be very, very interesting to see. It's only been published in South Africa, so all rights, both in English and in translation outside South Africa, are available. So now I've taken 45 minutes of your time, so I will stop here. I thank you all for listening. Please email if any of these titles you think could fit your list and you'd like to read and consider it. And as I said, if you're going to be around in Frankfurt, also I would love to see you there. And if we haven't arranged a meeting and you would like one, also just, you know where to find me. So thank you very much for listening, and take care, and hopefully see you soon in person very